we will start with a quick questions for you, and I request all of you to participate in this, actively. Kindly post your answers on the chat box. The question over here is, why is risk management important? Your option one is results in more opportunities being captured proactively and turned into positive benefits for the project. Failing to manage risk will result in more problems and issues, increasing the chances of project failure. Kindly post your answers. Is risk management important because there are more opportunities, or it is because failing to manage risk will result in more problems and issues, increasing the chances of project failures? Yes. Wow. Very interesting. Each one of them is, given correct answer. B. Yes. Okay, let's move on to the next question, please. Question number 2. After reviewing the risk register, as an analyst, you see 2 critical risks that you anticipate during the next week. What should you do with that knowledge? Should you do nothing? You just sit on this, sleep on this? Or you reach out to the stakeholders and the responsible person? Awesome, very good. Wow. Yes. So it is, you should reach out to the right stakeholders and the responsible person and share this. Okay. Thank you so much for your overwhelming response. Let's move on to the presentation next. Yeah. So as the topic says, types of business risks. Today's topic is business risk and mitigations. So as the topic suggests, we will talk about business risks. But before we talk about risk, business risk, I would like to ask you, what is risk? In a simple language, in our daily life, what do you understand by risk? Is there anyone who would like to post their answer on the chat box? What is risk? Uncertainty. Okay. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Possibility of a failure. Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes. So in a simple language, in a daily routine life, we all see those risks, and risk is nothing but possibility of something bad happening. That is what we call as risk. And when you talk about business risk, the risk in terms of business, this is anything that threatens a company's ability to achieve its financial goals is considered to be a business risk. So with this, a little simplified definition of what is risk, I would also like to tell you the types of risk. So risk occurs in one of these, types, which is strategic risk and compliance risk, reputational risk, and operational risk. What do we understand by strategic risk? So strategic risk is nothing but it is a risk which is like a business decision taken at the top level, at the board level. So it's a strategic at the company level decisions which has risk on the organizations to tomorrow, the result which will come according to that. So this risk could be like, the risk of stakeholders pressures and competitive pressures, and there could be technology changes, there could be merger and acquisitions related risk. So all those risks which are taken at the management level, those risks fall under strategic risk. You talk about, product selection, financial exposures. There are a couple of examples mentioned in the presentation as well. So these risks are strategic risks which we have, when we start a business and an entrepreneurship. Next is reputational risk. Now, what is reputational risk? The reputational risk is the threat, which is like a reputational threat to the organization, because of which we see there's a huge risk. Reputational risk is the damage that can occur to a business when it fails to meet the expectations of the stakeholders, and it is when it is negatively perceived by the customers and all the stakeholders, including customers. So that is where we call it as a reputational risk, because of which the ability of the organization is goes down to achieve its financial results. So this is where we call it as reputational risk. Next is compliance risk. Now, compliance risk is mainly to those industries where the industry is regulated, like insurance industry, where we operate in. We operate in an environment wherein we are regulated by a regulator, which is IRDI, all the insurance companies, brokers, and all of that. So in a situation wherein we see those compliance risks and which are in a regulated industry, we call it as compliance risk wherever we feel that an organization suffer as a result of its failure to comply with the laws and guidelines and regulations which are set by the regulator. This is where we see that there are compliance and regulator related risks that we have on the organization. There could be risk related to like compliance. They could be fraud, theft, bribery, money laundering. Any of these could be a risk which is on the organization if an organization and its people do not comply to the laws and regulations which are set by the regulator. And the last one is operational risk, which is the risk, as the word says, it is like on day-to-day operations of the company. If it fails to perform the day-to-day operations, that is where we see the operational risk, and due to which we basically, there could be a situation wherein we we are on the lower side of the profits, or it may absolutely lead to a situation wherein the company goes bankrupt as well. Next slide, please. Global risk. So apart from the risk that we spoke just now, we also have, risks which are global risk, and what is global risk? So a global risk is something, can somebody tell me what is global risk? If you can just, there's anyone who would like to post their response on this as well. And I would request each one of you to keep posting your questions, your anywhere where you feel you want further discussion on any topic, or you want to know more, or you have some questions, or you want to answer something. I would request you to keep posting, because I have a lot of my colleagues on the call, and some of them would definitely respond to your questions as well. So what is, we were talking about economic risk. Now, the risk exposure of an investment made in foreign countries. So, I'll give you an example of economic risk. It could be like interest rates, exchange rates, recession, inflation, taxes. All of these are part of economical risk which an organization goes through, which an organization always has. The next one is cybersecurity risk. As the word says, it is about cybersecurity is nothing but the breach of the data breach, wherein the hackers basically hack all the sites and the tech of the organization. And that's where because of cybersecurity, the organization faces a lot of issues like the reputation. You take an example of a banking. If a data breach happens in any of the bank, and you as a customer feel insecure to work and to kind of deal with that bank, and hence, it's a reputational loss as well, even though it is a cybersecurity risk, but it leads to many other risks which are associated to cybersecurity risk. Next, please. Yeah. So extreme weather changes. Even though, there's an example which is given here, you can easily understand by this example, weather change is something which leads to huge losses to the organization. It could be, natural disasters, like it could be because of Assam floods, and we see, such disasters happening across the country. Sometimes this part of the country, sometimes that part of the country, you see floods happening, you see, other natural disasters that happen. So all those big natural disasters, extreme weather changes is what we call as which basically damage the physical assets of the organization, which basically, makes the company in a situation, puts the company in a situation wherein they are either not able to operate completely, or they have to wait for the, they have to bring themselves to the same position again, rebuild, and then start the operations. So that's a bigger and risk which is there on our organization. Apart from global cooperation, that we have the next one, Russia-Ukraine war. We also see the latest one, which is China and Taiwan tensions as well. So such situations are part of the global cooperations risk that each organization goes through. Next one, please. Anybody would like to give an example or say what is social cohesion? What is this? How is this related to business? How it is, a risk on an organization? I would like to hear from the students on this. What is social cohesion? What is this? It is basically a stronger bond, right? In a layman term. So how does it impact business? Is, if anything, any one of you would like to think about it, how does it impact business? So social cohesiveness, so it is like, in a way, it's like, it puts the company in a situation wherein, you have like different groups and different thought processes. It really helps the organization if there is a stronger bonds, within the society, and there is like across different groups, and there's a trust that you put in the institution, in the government, in the organization, and that is how it helps the organization to balance it and make it, it's a risk on the organization which you see. Geopolitical, which is again the competition that we see within two different countries that we see, and those risks we call this geopolitical shifts can affect sales and markets that are vulnerable and to the geographical shocks, and hence it is part of the geopolitical risk to an organization. Next one, please. Now, on this slide, we'll see how do we mitigate those risks. So we've seen that, there are anything and everything that we do, we have risk, and we want to see what are the ways of mitigating those risks. Even though we have those risks, how do we mitigate those risks? So, there are, we have created 4 buckets over here, which is there's a risk. Now you accept that risk, you avoid the risk, you transfer the risk, and you mitigate the risk. Now, when we talk about accepting the risk, we clearly say over here that this is the best strategy when, when the risk is small or unlikely to happen. We would like to accept it and we would like to move on. It makes sense to adapt risk when the cost of mitigating or avoiding it will be higher than merely accepting it and leaving it to chance. So what we say is that risk acceptance comes down to risking it. It comes to terms that the risk exists and there is nothing you will do to mitigate it. That means you will retain that risk. You will not do anything about this. You will accept it and move on. Then the next one is avoidance. So, actually risks can't be avoided much, but in a couple of situations, we can definitely do that. It is like if a risk from starting a project itself or starting a business itself, that starting of this project or this business is very, very risky. Like, you talk about launching any particular product or starting a project, or, you want to start your business in a particular country. But in the beginning itself, that there is a huge risk and it's too large to accept. And, you would like to avoid such risk. So in those situations, the risk can be avoided. The next one is transference of the risk. Now, when we talk about transference of the risk, what do we say here? It is like, as it talks about transfer. Risk transfer is nothing but moving the risk to any third party, right? Which is like, it could be an insurance company, or it could be any third party. So transferring your risk to a third party is known as is called as a transfer of the risk. So you take the risk, but you transfer this risk via an agreement to a third party. right? It can be risk transfers can be outsourced. It can be moved to an insurance company, or it could be given to any company, an entity, which is like, you talk about in case of properties, you leasing out properties. So the risk can be transferred to a third party. This is what is known as risk transference. Now, mitigation. When we talk about mitigation, it is the risks are evaluated. Now we realize that some risks are better not to avoid or accept. In this instance, what we do, risk mitigation is explored. We mitigate, what we mean by mitigation is processes and methods of controlling the risk. When you identify risk and its probabilities, you can allocate resources and management to mitigate those risks, is what we call it as a risk mitigation. So this is how, when you start any project, you identify the risk and you would like to put that risk in one of these buckets and see how do you want to manage that. So ways of mitigating risk. How do you mitigate those risks? There are, we just discussed, there are different ways to mitigate the risk. How do you mitigate those risks is what we will discuss here. There are a number of ways wherein you would like to reduce the losses. You would like to reduce and mitigate those risks through, loss preventions and controls, risk reductions, like, you will have fire sprinklers in the premises. You will see that, the burglar alarms are there in the premises. You will see that there's a security guard who sits in the premises. You would like to have regular checkups of the machineries that you will have in the premises. In case of a manufacturing, you would like to see that, yes, the machineries and all of that are regularly working. So all of that is kind of, as the ways wherein we would like to mitigate the risk. Right, you design your work areas to reduce the chances of accident. So when you start the work, you design in a way that the chances of accident are minimized. Right, educate your employees on the safety systems. You do regular checkups of all your services, your safeties, and all of that. So these are a couple of ways when we would like to mitigate the risk. We can take a lot of actions and we can take a lot of steps to reduce our risk on the premises. Next one, please. Transference. So how do you transfer the risk? When we talk about transfer of the risk, we just now discussed on this. Risk transfer is the risk management and control strategy wherein you contractually shift the risk to some third party. It could be an insurance company wherein you buy an insurance policy. Say in case of fire insurance, to cover your assets, you would like to take, a fire insurance. And let's say if fire happens tomorrow, and if your business, you are not able to operate, you are not able to do anything, and you suffer profit losses, right? Loss of profit, you would like to take a business interruption cover. So there are coverages available for each type of risk, which is like transferable risk to an insurance company. So risk can be transferred to a third party via insurance policy, right? Next one, please. So risk assessment steps. Now, what do we understand by risk assessment steps? Now, these are risk assessment steps wherein we take few steps. We follow these steps to identify the risk, to see what is the risk and all of that. So first step is to identify. How do you identify? Like who might be harmed and how. So that is how you identify that what could be the harm and who might be harmed, how somebody could be harmed. So that is what you identify at the first stage. And at the second stage, you see what are you doing to manage those hazards that harm. So what steps would you take to manage those harms? Determine who might be harmed and how would you manage that. And then the next step is you would like to know what else could you do to manage this hazard, who will do the management, and when will it be done. That means you would like to do, you identify, you determine, you evaluate the risk and take precautions, you record your findings, and then you, on regular periodic basis, you review the assessment and update, keep it updating. And that's how we follow these steps to assess the risk. Next one, please. This is something, very interesting chart. This is a matrix, a chart by which we would like to, we will understand here how this helps us to understand when you start any business, anything that you see, you would like to understand what is the severity of the risk that you have and what is the impact, so likelihood. So what is the impact of the risk that you have and what could be the frequency of the losses. So when we talk about impact, it is about the quantum, the size of loss, what could be the losses in terms of amount and the financial loss to you. When we talk about likelihood of the occurrence, we talk about the how frequently the loss could happen. So when we talk about, in this we talk about these four boxes, talk about the first box, which is extreme left, the lower box. It talks about low risk, low frequency. That means the impact is low and the frequency is low. So this is that risk which is good. The low impact on the on the bottom. The left one says that the impact of probability, and the impact probability chart shows that what is the severity that you can see and what is the likely of happening that situation. So this is like low one. So since it is very low in occurrence as well as impact, organizations generally tend to retain that risk on the books as well. When we go to the next one, on the left side we see medium level risk, wherein we talk about medium level risk. We talk about now the one which we were talking about, low risk. This is categorized in the, if you talk about giving a color to the this risk in this chart, we generally give green color to this because this risk is assumed to be a most favorable, most risk which is very unlikely to happen. When we talk about the risk which is medium on severity and medium on frequency, we give it generally an orange color because the chances of happening and the impact of that risk could be it's generally termed as on the medium size. And when we talk about the box which is on the right side, which is high level of occurrence and high on impact, this is the risk which is like it is like the most likely to happen, and the impact of the risk is extremely on the high side. This group of risk is usually, we term it as and give it a color of red color. We denote it as with a red color. So this is the risk which we generally kind of insurance clients, businesses, they transfer this risk to insurance companies because the severity and the frequency of the losses could be very high, and hence you would like to transfer that risk to a third party. And if possible, in situations wherever you can avoid, you would like to avoid those risks if the situation helps you to avoid that. Next one, please. Now, how to implement ways of mitigation. There are steps how we can, we just discussed this in the previous slide as well. How do you implement the risk ways we discussed for the mitigation? These ways are, you assume the risk and accept it. You avoid the risk, you control the risk, transference of the risk, and watch and monitor to the risk. This is broadly we can say, but if you talk about, over here steps, we have given 5 steps. We talk about identifying, then we assess, then we treat it, then we monitor and report it. When we identify, what do we do when we identify? We set up a broad-based selection of stakeholders. We make a committee, we make a team who then identifies the risk associated to all the areas. And once we identify, we assess that what is the likelihood to happen and impact and occur that risk, and what could be the degree of impact of that risk. And when that is identified, when we assessed, when that is the assessment is done, then we move to the next step. In the next step, we generally decide to mitigate. What are the ways? How can we mitigate those risks? We discussed in the previous slides. In case of mitigation, we have regular checkups of the premises. We see there's a security guard 24/7 in the premises. We do regular checkups of the machineries in a case of a manufacturing. So all those we try and do at this step. And then we move to monitor. We regularly monitor these exercises. We regularly check, and mainly our mitigation, we keep a monitor on that. And then the last one comes is risk, letting each of the stakeholder be aware of the situation, and then we keep reporting the situation. We keep reporting the areas of all these assessments and implementations that we do on the mitigation side.